let's put up the photograph of Robert Maxwell. This is number 19 on our list of photos. Okay, so there's Robert Maxwell, publisher, extremely wealthy businessman, died in mysterious circumstances, fell off of his yacht.
Naked.
Yes. And drowned, and
had a heart attack.
Yes. Which came first?
We don't know.
Standing on the yacht rail naked, and you have a heart attack?
Fall over, or did you have a heart attack after you drowned?
After somebody knocked you off the rail, all right? So Robert Maxwell is believed to be a Israeli Mossad spy. I suggest you read
Gideon's Spies.
Gideon's Spies by the late Gordon Thomas. I interviewed him many times. And I guess, Doc, maybe we should go and bring back the interview I did with Gordon Thomas. We should just put it up on the website as audio.
Right.
It's done many, many years ago. Gordon Thomas passed away, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And but Gordon Thomas was convinced that Robert Maxwell was an Israeli Mossad spy.
He provided a great deal of evidence to it. I mean, it was a compelling read.
Maxwell owned a publishing house,
Several
some prominent, well-known publications.
The British Printing Corporation, Sinclair Research, Macmillan Publishers, and the Mirror Group newspapers, which owns the Daily Mirror.
Macmillan Publishing at one time was the largest producer of textbooks for schools in the U.S. at one time.
That's right.
And so
he owned it.
That's right.
How about that? Get propaganda into the school textbooks.
Yes. So.
And Mr. Maxwell has his own long history with Israel, going back to the 1948 war. It's been considered to be a fact at this point that Maxwell helped smuggle in through an operation for air parts to the Israeli Air Force, allowing them to maintain air supremacy during the Arab-Israeli War in 1948. And as you noted, Gordon Thomas, he took this, I would say, much further than anyone else has taken the story on Maxwell, so much so that it wasn't simply that Mr. Maxwell, you believe Mr. Maxwell was more than simply an agent for the Mossad, was involved actively in potentially launching a coup in Russia to put the KGB chief in and topple the current prime minister at the time, which was Mikhail Gorbachev. And
he wasn't prime minister; he was the president.
The president,
right?
Yes, the president of the Soviet Union at the time. But the crazy thing with Mr. Maxwell, especially in regard to what Gordon Thomas has said, is Gordon Thomas doesn't believe it was an accidental death. Gordon Thomas believes that Mossad killed Mr. Maxwell because
their own agent,
because there are two things. He was planning to double-cross the Mossad, potentially sell out information, set up his own shop, let's say, with the blackmailing information that he was generating. But two, that he was basically acting rogue in regard to this coup and other operations.
Well, there was another factor involved with that too. He was hundreds of millions of dollars in debt, and was actually
$400 million,
and was wanting to use his knowledge and information that he had in order for someone to pay off that debt. And so he was using that as an opportunity. I've got information, I need cash.
So a businessman who's deep in debt and facing bankruptcy is a prime candidate to be entrapped in an espionage network.
Yes.
Now, that could fit a lot of people.
Right.
When you owe $400 million.
And I've read
desperate.
It could be into the billions.
Yes.
When the actual bankruptcy took place, when Maxwell, Mr. Maxwell died, every part of his empire in publishing fell apart. And just only his brother was holding alone $400 million. It could be upwards of a couple billion, if not, I saw one figure, $400 billion. As one of the numbers presented of the debts he owed across 43 different banks.
Okay, so we're talking about Robert Maxwell, and there's a reason for it. As we've established, he was a Mossad spy for Israel. Number two, he had a daughter who is still alive. And
Ghislaine Maxwell.
Ghislaine? It's pronounced Ghislaine?
Ghislaine Maxwell.
Ghislaine Maxwell. And so you need to know these two names. Robert Maxwell and Ghislaine Maxwell, because personally I'm convinced that Ghislaine Maxwell is Jeffrey Epstein's handler for the Israeli Mossad. I don't believe she works for him. He works for her. I think Jeffrey Epstein was recruited and given a position, pretend to be a billionaire. Jeffrey Epstein has never been a billionaire. He's never made any business deals himself. He was allowed to pretend to be a billionaire, and his job was to entrap influential Americans and Brits and others around the world, entrap them in sex scandals with underage teenage girls so that they could be blackmailed. So his job was pretend to be a billionaire and entrap influential people. His salary was unlimited access to teenage girls. And he got to use all of the company benefits, right? The mansions, the jets.
Cars.
He could pretend to be a billionaire. Everybody thought he was a billionaire. But he knew he's not a billionaire. He's working for the company. Who's the company? Zionism, Israel, Mossad. What's the plan? Entrap influential Americans and others in Great Britain and Europe. So we have Ghislaine Maxwell, the daughter.
That name Ghislaine means an offering or a sacrifice.
Yes, it means a sacrifice, a pledge. Actually, a pledge. It means a pledge. So Robert Maxwell named his daughter Pledge. That's an unusual thing. Why would you give your daughter the name Pledge? What did you pledge? You pledged your daughter. So his yacht was named Lady Ghislaine.
Yes,
that's right. Another pledge.
All right. So we're setting this up for you because we showed you this photograph a few days ago, and I want to go to still number 21. And this is Lady Ghislaine. Ghislaine. I got to say it the way it is.
To be fair,
not the way it's
most of the
spelled.
media is saying Ghislaine.
Ghislaine.
But when I listened to her interview, she says her name is Ghislaine.
Ghislaine. So there is Lady Ghislaine yacht, named for Robert Maxwell's daughter, Ghislaine.
His youngest daughter.
So this is very important you follow these connections. Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell, Lady Ghislaine. This is the yacht that Robert Maxwell fell off of naked and drowned, which Gordon Thomas said he was executed by Mossad, although he was working for Mossad. But see, that's a dangerous job.
Right.
When you work for a spy agency, you most likely will have a tragic death, because at some point you know too much.
You live by the sword, you die by the sword.
That's right. So where are we going with this? Because this starts to become really troubling for the Trump campaign. We're going to go to...
I guess the good question would be, where is this yacht now? Who has this yacht today?
I don't know. Who does?
Well, it's actually owned currently by Saudi Arabian lawyer Dr. Al Cooley. And this is the first of many Saudi connections in the Epstein scandal.
Yeah, let's hold on to this. Let's save this for... I want to walk people through this, because this is mind-boggling. Okay? We'll save this for a little bit later in the program. So let's look at the photograph. This would be... where's the photograph of the...
You're talking about the photograph of President Trump and Robert Maxwell. That's number 25 for control.
All right. And this, we actually showed this yesterday as well.
Yes.
So,
yeah, we were blown away by this the other day. I guess we showed it last week, didn't we? Last Friday. So Robert Maxwell, wealthy publisher from London, Israeli spy standing on the right. The next man to his left is CBS newsman Mike Wallace, who is Jewish. Then in the center, the small, short man is former Senator John Tower of Texas, who Gordon Thomas told me used his position as chairman of the Senate, I guess was the Foreign Affairs or Intelligence Committee. He used his position in the Senate to get Israeli spies into American nuclear research facilities.
Los Alamos.
Los Alamos, specifically, yes. And
I have a little bit of a bio on him, but I can wait on.
Yeah, go ahead.
Specifics. We're looking into this. Specifically, Senator John Tower. He took over Lyndon B. Johnson's Senate seat.
Let's go back. Just keep the photograph up there, so we can just keep.
Yeah, so let's keep the photo on it. And
he replaced LBJ.
LBJ.
Who is the one responsible for the USS Liberty?
That's correct.
Which was a Israeli false flag operation to start a war against the Arabs.
That's correct. And then after leaving office, Senator Tower led the Tower Commission, which investigated the Iran-Contra affair and published a report though it was highly critical of the Reagan administration, it didn't really look into much of the actual allegations to smuggling, illicit relations with foreign nations. It was a sort of, I'd say, a rubber stamp on the investigation. You leave it alone, leave especially the players out of jail, including the Reagan administration. Now, Senator Towers, he supported Gerald Ford rather than Ronald Reagan in the 1966 primaries. Yes. And was for legalized abortion. He was against the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. He also opposed President Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative, the Star Wars program, which actually has led up to the current issue we have with standoff with ballistic missiles with Russia. After leaving Congress,
maybe it was the Senate Defense, the Armed Service. It would
make sense.
It was Armed Services. He was chairman of the Armed Services Committee.
That's correct. And after leaving Congress, he served as the chief negotiator because of that experience on the Senate Armed Services Committee for the strategic arms reduction talks with the Soviets. So he had a tie with the Soviets, had enough of a rapport that he could be used out of office.
Did he die in a private plane crash?
He sure did. And I'll just mention this now.
Was he naked when the plane crashed?
Well, I'm not sure if he was naked, but he definitely was burned alive. And Senator Tower died in 1991 in Atlantic Southeast Airlines Flight 2311 crash in Brunswick, Georgia. Now, this was caused by a, quote, failure of the plane's propeller control unit. This is according to the official investigation. But it was a very odd incident, especially in the 90s when plane safety was at its highlight. I mean, the fact that this accident occurred, but the year is going to be very important moving forward the rest of the show. 1991 is when Senator Towers passed away. The last part of interest here is that Senator Towers was put up to be George H.W. Bush's defense secretary. He couldn't make it through the Senate confirmation hearing, and it was an embarrassment scene. He ended up after that because he couldn't become the defense secretary.
Why did the Senate refuse to confirm him as Secretary of Defense?
Some have said it was alcohol use, but that's just not really correct. It's not the full story. There was a lot of questions about the background for Senator Tower, especially in regard to the actions he took during the Iran-Contra era, and as you already noticed there, mentioned rather, maybe his use as part of what we're now uncovering as a major international Mossad spy ring.
That's right. That's right. They used alcohol, that he was a closet alcoholic, as the reason to deny him confirmation as Secretary of Defense. But a lot of people speculated it was because he had questionable loyalty to the United States, that he perhaps had been recruited by a foreign power. Well, the only foreign power that he's knowingly helped was Israel. Right. Now, the guy on the far left, Steve Ross. Who is Steve Ross? Oh, excuse me. Beside John Tower is Donald Trump.
Right. Yes.
So there is Donald J. Trump, pictured with Robert Maxwell, Israeli spy, Mike Wallace, CBS anchorman, John Tower, known to assist Israeli Mossad spies get into Los Alamos. And then we have Donald Trump, and then the man to the far left, standing next to Donald Trump, is Steve Ross. Who is Steve Ross?
Well, so he is was the CEO of Time Warner. Now, the little background on Steve Ross, he was born Stephen J. Reknitz, son of Jewish immigrants to Brooklyn.
He changed his name?
Changed his name. And we're seeing this again to be
Why do they do that so often?
And I can only speculate, maybe it's like what my family had to do. Original last name was Zelinsky. But when they immigrated to England to fit in, they changed the name to Zoll. But I don't know if that's the case with here, but I've seen that a lot in this investigation, that a lot of the individuals...
I mean, my name is German. It's Vilas.
Vilas.
It's not Wiles, it's Vilas. But when they got when they got to America, people looked at the spelling because Germans pronounce W as a V.
Right.
All right. And so the Americans, speaking American, said Wiles, but the name is Vilas.
Right. And we know names mean things, especially in politics. I mean, there's a reason why Yael Kushner is not going by Yael Kushner. She's still calling herself Ivanka Trump publicly.
Yes.
Because names mean things.
Yes. But my family didn't change their name.
It was just mispronounced.
It was mispronounced.
Oh. That's a good change for you.
But these guys changed their names.
They did change their names.
To disguise their identity.
Right.
So his history actually dates back to 1953. He married Carol Rosenthal, and she was the daughter of a Manhattan funeral home owner, Edward Rosenthal, who operated the largest funeral company in the United States. It was called Riverside Memorial Chapel. This is where they accepted employment as a funeral director. This is Steve Ross's first job, the future CEO of Time Warner. Why this is important is that through...
He started out burying people?
Started out by burying people, which some might say is ironic that it's tied into this situation where many have died in mysterious circumstances. I'm sure this scandal alone has buried many.
That's interesting. So he's the founder of Time Warner?
Yes, he's the founder, the CEO of Time Warner.
Okay, so any suspicious information about the early days of Time Warner?
So the money that went into Time Warner is of interest, and there's a tie-in to two crime dons, as this is how they're referred to by Connie Brock in her book Master of Game, Steve Ross and the Creation of Time Warner. Now, she referred to them as mafia dons. The two names are Manny Kimmel and Abner Zwillman. These aren't Italian names. They're not.
It says Jewish mafia.
Jewish, right. It's fair to assume Jewish mafia. But these two, they actually worked. They came into a partnership with Steve Ross early, and they created a parking company called Kinney Parking Company. Kinney Parking Company. And they were being monitored by the FBI at the time. The FBI didn't really intervene, and this business eventually turned into...
But the FBI was watching them?
That's correct, according to...
The founders, the people that provided the seed capital money for Time Warner.
That's
They were
correct.
being watched by the FBI.
That's correct. And this to this day, no one knows that about Time Warner, that their beginnings were both humble and under investigation by J. Edgar Hoover. The tie-in to the onset of Time Warner is Kinney Parking Company came out and became Kinney National Services. It was taken public in 1962. And part of this is Kinney, referring back to basically the company, paid $40 million for Warner Brothers, and that is actually how they became the mega company in 1971. This all came from the company that Manny Kimmel and Abner Zwillman helped Steve Ross start.
That's an interesting history. I never knew. All right, so that's the man standing next to Donald Trump. And what year was that photograph?
That photograph is 1989. 1989, and we know the exact date.
Is that the photograph that was found here in Florida in
like a thrift shop?
Thrift shop?
Yeah, so the Palm Beach thrift shop, that's the photo we showed on Friday, and we didn't know all the players in this. But since Friday, I've been stuck on this, trying to figure out all the players in the photo and try to find anything else, because it seemingly is a very important photo, especially the fact that you have both the current president and Robert Maxwell, which across many circles, including the research by Gordon Thomas, was a Mossad agent.
Now, I have to ask this question, Edward, because there might be people in the audience asking this. How do you know that photograph was taken in May of 1989? How do you know that?
Well, first, what I was doing before even finding an article on this was I was trying to look at the original photos of Senator Tower and Steve Ross, photos from the time. And I was able to date it through that process to between 1987 to 1989. Then this morning, I came across the May 17th edition of the 1989 St. Louis Post-Dispatch. This is a Wednesday. And this edition noted that Robert Maxwell had a party on his yacht. We have this right here to show up on screen. This is a party. This was in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, May 17th, 1989. See on the right there? On their toes. Robert Maxwell. Well, see, this article detailed a special party that Maxwell's holding on his yacht. And it's important that Maxwell's holding parties because part of what Gordon Thomas said about Maxwell was that the deal the Mossad and even Russian intelligence had is that the yacht would be the place of business, the place where Maxwell would bring powerful figures to be entrapped, to be looked at, to listen to, and even to be shared and brought into ongoing operations. Well, here is a party that occurred on that very yacht. Now, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch noted a couple of guests, specifically said that every guest there was handpicked by Robert Maxwell himself. And it included Donald Trump, his wife Ivana, former Texas Senator Tower, ex-Secretary John Lehman, Ghislaine Maxwell, lawyer Tom Boland, literary agent Mort Janklow, UN envoy Thomas Pickering, New York Post owner Peter Kalikow, and Robert Maxwell's niece Helen Atkin of Maximilian Publishing. Now, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch insisted that every guest, and this is an order from Robert Maxwell himself, insisted that every guest take their shoes off before going on the yacht. Now, at face value, that just seems like he wanted to keep a tidy boat. He wanted to keep the plush carpet clean. But let's go back. We know that this boat was being used potentially as a honeypot yacht.
So all those rich, powerful, influential people were told, when you come on this yacht, no shoes. You got
no shoes. And President Trump, according to the article,
you're telling a billionaire to take off his shoes.
Yeah.
A piece of clothing that will, after the yacht, leave. A piece of something, an item that an individual owns that will leave with them after the yacht party.
So all right, other than he was a clean freak and wanted to keep his yacht looking nice, all right, which I could get that. Okay, take off your shoes, all right. I just had the yacht remodeled, all right. You know, I could buy this story, but how could you use that line for a nefarious purpose?
Well, this would have given Maxwell a unique opportunity to, let's say, plant or swab for. They could plant a listening device, swab for potential DNA, any kind of skin, sweat even, that is in the shoe, both to determine health, but also genetic makeup, all these things which could be used by an intelligence agency.
Well, if you wanted to make somebody sick and you had their DNA,
right,
you'd have
could make a germ-based weapon,
right.
Just like we had in the headlines about the CIA, their potential involvement in ticks, basically carrying the Dearborn disease,
That's right,
the Lyme disease.
Okay, so the yacht that President Trump was on, 1989, was the Lady Ghislaine, the name for the daughter of Robert Maxwell, and Ghislaine Maxwell was on that boat
at that
time with Donald Trump. Right? And Lady Ghislaine, or not Lady, that's the yacht. Ghislaine Maxwell is in the center of the Epstein sex scandal today. And people think that she's an employee, but I'm telling you, folks, it's the other way around.
Yeah.
All right. Epstein is the employee.
Yeah, and what's telling about it.
She's the handler.
Some direct proof for that is that Ghislaine doesn't actually stay with Mr. Epstein. She owns her own apartment within a couple blocks of Mr. Epstein's New York mansion, but she has stayed in her own, as a group, her own property, her own
She's
schedule.
there when the teenage girls are brought in.
That's right, and manages them, according to
that's right.
lawsuits
She
which
manages
were alleged
them.
against Mr. Epstein and Alan Dershowitz.
She's up to her eyeballs in this sex scandal with these teenage girls. She's got to go to prison with Epstein.
Right. I read an article yesterday that after Robert Maxwell's passing, Ghislaine Maxwell became like a socialite in London, and in kind of a weird way, she became like a high-profile socialite because her dad was had questionable connections, right? But I read one article in particular from that particular time that talked about some goofy guy that would hang out with her all the time. That goofy guy was none other than Jeffrey Epstein. And so this relationship started picking up sometime after the passing of Robert Maxwell. And you begin to see, and once again, we're putting the proposal out there, it wasn't that Ghislaine Maxwell worked for Jeffrey Epstein, but that Ghislaine Maxwell is the handler for Jeffrey Epstein. And it's curious, we have not heard much from Ghislaine Maxwell in the past couple weeks.
Where is she?
That's a good question.
She hasn't been brought in. Last reports are she has been seen in Atlanta, from my understanding, that she was potentially in Paris with Mr. Epstein. But these are all speculations because there hasn't been any formal arraignment. She has not been named as a conspirator, for example, in the Epstein case.
And isn't that peculiar?
Yes, they're going to let her. They're going to let her walk. Doc, you told me some things about her today. Some of her interesting skills.
Right. She is a licensed pilot, not a Cessna, a jet. She can fly a jet.
So could she fly the Lolita Express?
She probably did fly the Lolita.
She's licensed, qualified to fly it?
Yes.
For that class of aircraft, yes.
Yes, she is. She's also a helicopter pilot. She's also one of the few women in the world that is licensed on several different classes of submersibles or submarines.
A submarine?
Yeah. So you have to have a license, I guess, to drive a submarine. You can't just, take a driving course or something. You have to be licensed to drive a submarine.
Lady Ghislaine,
she can.
I mean, Ghislaine Maxwell is 007.
Yes, no, literally.
This is a spy. This is a James Bond spy. She drives submersible submarines. She flies
Helicopters,
jets,
airplanes.
helicopters.
And other than the photo that we showed you, there is no connection into Jeffrey Epstein's sphere or even hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein after her father's passing. She was reportedly at that party in 1989, but she didn't really start hanging out, wasn't seen publicly with Jeffrey Epstein until 1992.
And it was Jeffrey Epstein being seen with her. Yes. She was the higher profile person there. In fact, the London press was like, who is this guy? Who's this hanging out with Ghislaine Maxwell? And then she made the transition to the U.S. later.
And then, we saw the photograph the other day of Ghislaine Maxwell in the background at Chelsea Clinton's wedding.
That's right.
As Bill Clinton's walking Chelsea down the aisle, there's Ghislaine Maxwell. There it is, right there.
The other photo is Prince Andrew. Prince Andrew with Virginia Roberts, one of the primary
victims.
The rape victims who were alleged rape against.
Standing to the right is Robert Maxwell's daughter, Ghislaine Maxwell, who may very well possibly be a Mossad spy. She drives a submarine, she flies a jet, she flies a helicopter, she manages an international sex trafficking operation, she handles Jeffrey Epstein. This woman is 007 for the Israeli Mossad. And the young lady in the center is one of the teenagers.
Virginia Roberts.
She's not a teenager there, but she was at 13, 14 years old when she was recruited and brought into the operation.
Right. And she eventually became like a lieutenant in this war. She was helping to recruit other young girls into this sordid operation.
This is getting deeper. Where is the Lady Ghislaine yacht?
The Lady Ghislaine yacht right now is owned by Saudi Arabian lawyer Dr. Al Curley. So after Mr. Maxwell died, the yacht essentially had to be sold off for assets to cover some of the debt that Mr. Maxwell left behind. Somehow, on a side note, Ghislaine Maxwell wasn't hit as heavily by the indebtedness of her father. It's important to note because she maintained wealth, even separate than Mr. Epstein. But it's in the hands of a Saudi Arabian lawyer named Dr. Al Curley. Now, not much is known about Mr. Curley, but he is reported to have paid at the time 9 million British pounds, let's say roughly 17 to 18 million dollars for the yacht.
Anything else that we need to cover on this one before we move to the second topic?
Oh, did you want to bring up the other Saudi connections or save that maybe for another day?
No. Let's. You want to go into it right now? Okay.
Okay, so the Saudi connection to this, so we just mentioned the Saudi lawyer bought the boat, but that's not even the biggest Saudi connection here. There is a big-named arms dealer who had both a tie-in with Iran-Contra, was the middleman, literally, between Oliver North, Ronald Reagan's Oliver North,
John Tower,
and Israel and Iran, the center of this scandal. It just so happens he's found himself in the center of this scandal. So the man I'm talking about, and there's been so many connections that pop up on this that first I'll introduce the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. So that article that I was able to confirm about the party just so happened to have a weird blurb off to the left of the same article. I'm going to show it on screen here.
I'm going to say, folks, get ready. Just hang on to your seat because you're not going to believe the name that's going to pop up on the screen connected to this Epstein sex scandal. Get ready. Go ahead. Put it up on the screen.
Adnan Khashoggi,
Now,
the uncle of Jamal Khashoggi.
So this was on the same page of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch that talked about the party that we had just talked about, right?
That's
Yes.
correct. And
on
it
the
was,
same day, same page.
And what is this story about?
so this story was actually about Mr. Khashoggi being dropped from the Board of Trustees at American University in Washington, D.C. Now, Rick, they named a gym after him after he donated $5 million in 1984. And
Jamal Khashoggi's uncle
Yes.
is in the Epstein sex scandal story. This is so weird, folks. It's getting weirder. We're just starting on this. We're just scratching the surface of this thing. This is bigger than Pizzagate. Everybody wanted a Pizzagate investigation. Folks, this is 100 times bigger than that scandal. This could bring down the entire operation. This is huge.
now, Mr. Khashoggi has since passed away, but was, this is from The Independent in London, a notorious, their wording, well, I won't say their wording, actually.
Oh, no, say it, quote him. I mean, call it what it is.
They call him a whoremonger. They called him
It's a Bible word.
international whoremonger. The stereotype of Saudi royalty, billionaires, mind you, because he was a billionaire, coming into countries like the United States during the Super Bowl, for example, and trafficking girls, enjoying themselves, enjoying every decadent things that the Romans under Nero might have seen. That comes from
So he had a
Adnan
reputation.
Khashoggi.
He was a Saudi whoremonger.
Yes, and a playboy. And the interesting part about this is that there's a story yesterday, Rick, that there was a foreign passport that Jeffrey Epstein had in his vault.
Saudi.
Yeah, it was actually,
an Austrian passport
with a Saudi residence.
Yes.
And everyone's wondering why. How? First of all, to have a Saudi residence, you have to be sponsored in form either by the Saudi government or an individual.
So is Jeffrey Epstein's Saudi residence also the residence of a Khashoggi?
And this isn't just True News saying this. Vicky Ward of Kushner Inc. has said this too, that
Really?
the tie-in to Epstein for this case is Adnan Khashoggi. And in addition to this,
I need to read her book.
it's very good. I read it from page to page.
You do?
Yes,
You
I'll give her
did?
credit.
Okay.
I'll say the one
Could
thing
I
she-
borrow it from you?
Sure, yes.
All right, thank you. All right.
What's mine's yours.
All right.
But the thing with her, though, is that she has notably not included Bill Clinton or the Clintons in the book. And I've noticed that with the article she's publishing through the Daily Beast. That's just a side note. It completely ignores that aspect of the story. And it's a pivotal aspect of the story. But
Is Clinton connected to Khashoggi?
from my understanding, reading through this, the connection to Bill Clinton is actually through President Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. It's not direct. And that's odd to think this, but the reason why this is a connection is how Bill Clinton may know both Jamal, or especially Adnan Khashoggi, is actually through his time he spent in the early 2000s hanging out with both President Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. The connection to President Trump through Adnan Khashoggi, we mentioned this in passing, I think, last year. Because there was a big story for us when Jamal Khashoggi died. We're trying to figure out, why does this story matter? And how does this tie into Mohammed bin Salman? Well, it just so happens that in the late 80s, Donald J. Trump bought Adnan Khashoggi's super yacht.
Okay, so, he's a billionaire. He can buy a yacht. What's the big deal?
Well, he bought a yacht that was built at about $100 million by Adnan Khashoggi.
Okay.
The market price today would be $304 million. President J. Trump got an extreme discount on this ship.
So he paid what, $90 million for it?
About $29 million, according to reports. $29 million. He got it through the
President Trump did.
President Trump did.
And whose yacht did he buy?
He bought Adnan Khashoggi, the
folks-
uncle of Jamal Khashoggi.
Folks, please wrap your brain around this. Donald Trump bought a yacht from Adnan Khashoggi, who is the uncle of Jamal Khashoggi, who was cut up with a bone saw by Bone Salman.
Right.
Who Jeffrey Epstein had a framed photo of in his New York mansion.
And Mohammed bin Salman is a sleepover buddy with
Jared Kushner.
Jared Kushner. What a sordid mess. And you're going to tell me that Donald Trump is innocent and doesn't know any of this stuff? Seriously? You're going to believe that? He paid, what, 29, 30
$30
million?
For a $100 million boat.
For a $100 million
For
boat.
$100 million. That's a good buy.
Well,
29%.
Was it on clearance? I mean, what was going on? Why was he able to buy a boat so cheap? I mean, he probably was proud of that, wasn't he?
Oh, he's very proud of it. These are two quotes from President Trump, actually. One in 1988 after purchasing the boat. Go ahead.
What are the odds? What are the odds that the current president of the United States bought a yacht from the uncle of the man who was murdered last year with a bone saw?
It's insurmountable. I mean, going back to that photo, number 25 for control, that photo alone should have been the center. If we're going to do any investigation, let's find out what is up with that photo. No one has ever identified all the people in this photo before.
The entire Robert Mueller investigation was ludicrous.
Right.
Here is
the collusion.
There's the collusion. They're standing right there together. That's the collusion, but nobody will investigate it because it'll bring down the entire system. All right, so Donald Trump purchased Khashoggi's yacht for $29-30 million. What year was this?
This would have been 1988, according to records. 1988.
And this party,
1989.
That was on.
May of 1989.
That was on Maxwell's yacht.
Maxwell's yacht.
You got Khashoggi's yacht, Maxwell's yacht. Trump is involved in both of these yachts.
And then there's one other chapter, just a short chapter. This is that President Trump quickly sold the yacht.
Oh, so he made it.
He sold Adon.
He flipped it.
He flipped it. And initially, I thought he'd made a profit on this. Actually, going back to records, he actually made a loss, a $9 million loss. He sold it for $20 million to the
How long did he keep it?
He kept it about 2 years.
And who did he sell it to?
He sold it to none other than Saudi billionaire Al-Walid bin Talal.
Oh, no, come on.
All right.
You can say it. Slap my pappy.
Slap my pappy.
Slap my
Are
pappy.
you serious?
Yes. And this is the man.
This is the guy. All right.
Mohammed bin Salman hung this man upside down in the Ritz-Carlton in November of 2018.
And we speculated that his White House buddy, Kushner,
was one that sold him out.
Hand-walked the dossier of intelligence.
Shared intelligence because Kushner had a clearance for intelligence on the orders of Donald Trump.
Yeah, not on the orders of Defense Secretary Mattis or John Kelly, the chief of staff.
Kushner didn't qualify for a top secret clearance. He was denied clearance for some reason.
Well, they said because he didn't disclose the Kushner Company activity in the West Bank and also in China. He physically didn't disclose things which would be a conflict of interest.
Donald Trump ordered the intelligence agencies to give top secret clearance to his son-in-law.
Yes.
All right. And so we speculated that Kushner then shared with Mohammed bin Salman,
his sleepover
buddy, his pajama party buddy, shared with him top secret intelligence about Saudi officials such as Talal.
Yes.
And that they were being rounded up, hung upside down in the Ritz-Carlton Hotel.
Oh, ransom. There was a report that they had to pay billions of dollars, up to billions of dollars, to get their freedom. Even signed off shares of Twitter, for example. Bin Talal had a large stake in Twitter, which was reportedly signed over to the Saudi government.
Let's back this up just because I'm having trouble comprehending this. We're talking about the second yacht now. This is not Robert Maxwell's yacht.
Not the Lady Ghislaine.
Not the Lady Ghislaine. This is Adnan Khashoggi's yacht. Mm-hmm. Adnan Khashoggi, uncle of Kamal Khashoggi, who was butchered by Mohammed bin Salman using a bone saw
in the Turkish
embassy, Saudi embassy in Turkey, and Adnan Khashoggi sold his yacht to Donald J. Trump, and Donald J. Trump sold the yacht to the prince
at a loss.
At a loss.
Now, why would you sell something like this, a luxury asset, at a loss, mind you, too?
Money laundering?
That's an interesting question.
So elaborate money laundering going on?
Would it be that Adnan Khashoggi originally built this for $100 million, built this with arms smuggling money, maybe, or money he gathered through other various activities in the 80s related to Iran-Contra or other things, especially with women? sold it to President Trump, Donald Trump at the time, to get $29 million of clean money, because it's coming from Donald Trump out of New York, who then sold it back to the Saudis for $20 million. So you result with $20 million of completely cleaned money. This is something we've talked about with casinos. It's the same way casinos work.
But it's just the fact that the connection between a lot of unsavory, crooked, slimy people.
Yes.
Does Donald Trump know anybody that's not slimy? Does he hang out with anybody that's morally virtuous? Does he have any pictures of Trump with a morally virtuous person?